Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a weekly deep dive into the world of college admissions.
Hi, I'm Susan, and I'm a college counselor and have read applications for a small liberal arts college and 2 research universities. My twins are recent college graduates.
I'm Lisa, and I'm a clinical psychologist and college counselor. I have a daughter in college, a daughter in high school, and a son in middle school. After 30 years in Chicago, we recently moved to North Carolina.
My name is Mark. I'm a college coach in Atlanta and the parent of 2 daughters. Karis, a graduate of Davidson College, and she is the founder of the Spanish tutoring company, SpanishHelpToday.com. And Joy is a wellness coach at the Keenan Flagler Business School at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. This week in the news, we will be discussing the Common App Activities section. Vince and Susan and Julia and Hillary Dickman from Colorado College, all 5 of us. And it's part 1 of 3, do's and don'ts on how to complete the Common App Activities section. For the question for a listener, I'm flying solo. It's just me. And we got a question from Katie from New Jersey, and she wants to know, how does one parent bring along another parent when one person is informed and keeping up with the modern selectivity and the other parent still thinks it's the way it used to be in the 80s and 90s? Any tips for me on how to communicate with the other partner? I'll be taking that solo. And for our interview, we'll have the final phase of the Understanding Belmont interview with Chris Cage, the VP of Enrollment. It's both our interview and our college spotlight. Listen and enjoy. Friends, I am stoked for multiple reasons. We've never done a podcast with 5 people ever, and we have 5 co-hosts and esteemed guests about a topic we've been talking about for about 9 months, the Common App Activities, do's and don'ts. How do you fill it out? And so I'll just let each person say your name, and so everyone can know who's here. And Hillary, I'll let you say a little bit more at the end, but why don't we start with the top left corner? You want to just say your name over there, Miss Milton Academy?
It's Julia Esquivel from Milton Academy.
And this is Vince Garcia from Los Angeles, California.
Susan Tree here in suburban Philadelphia, a regular one of the co-hosts.
Hi, this is Hillary Dickman. I am on the admission staff at Colorado College, and I'm really excited to be here with you. Mark told me, I don't know, it was probably like 4 or 5 months ago that he was thinking about doing an episode on the activities list. And so while I was reading this season, I was sort of copying and pasting some things from students' applications into a Word document as I was hoping to not forget what made an impression on me from students' activities list. So hopefully that will be helpful.
Yeah, so there are 5 of us here from 5 states, and we're just going to go through some do's and don'ts. The first thing I want to say is we literally could have 100 do's and 100 don'ts, right? So this is not exhaustive. There are many other do's and many other don'ts. But these are just some things that we feel particularly strong about. We see it repeated oftentimes with the students we work with. So Hillary, why don't you kick it off with our first one?
Sure. When I am reading an application and I get to the activities section, the first thing that I'm really looking for is trying to figure out how a student spends the bulk of their time when they're not in school. So I'm not yet looking for like the big impact that they're making or even the thing that they like care the most about. I'm just trying to get a general sense for what does the student do when they're not in class? And I tell students during info sessions every time I lead one that like sort of the low bar that I'm trying to get students over during that initial part of reading the activities list is when you get out of school for the day and you go home, do you lie down on your bed and scroll TikTok all day long? And so that's like the initial thought that I have is when I'm looking at your activities list, I want to know sort of how you're spending your time outside of school. And so the way that I like to see a student kind of arrange their activities list is by giving me maybe the things that they're most proud of at the top, but really how they spend the bulk of the time on the first page, because the first page is where I'm going to focus most of my reading.
And, Hillary, that's similar to what I say, because students, of course, schedule meetings with us all the time, especially when they find out that order is important. And I always tell them two things. I said, you are expected to put them in the order of what's important to you. Don't try to figure out what you think's important to the school. Part of this is to get to know who the student is. I said, but there's going to be an expectation that the things toward the top is reflected a commensurate amount of time. If you put the things toward the top that have like 1 hour, then that's not congruent, and that's not gonna land well. Anybody else want to say anything on this, or do we want to move on to another one?
I think for me, one of the things that I do when I'm working with students is I always start big. So we always start with the resume, and I let them write like they're applying to the University of California, which allows 600 characters. And then we take that and we start to move down. So we do UC copy, then we do one for the Common App. And by the time we get to the Common App, it's really defined really well because, it's like 19 words in that little space.
Haley, I don't know if this will come as a surprise to you, but the mindset students have is completely, what do I need to do to get in? Like, that's just how they think. Like, what's best? They want us to tell them what is best, meaning what's going to help me to get in. So that's just the frame of reference. And, I was meeting with a dad yesterday, and he said, I feel terrible asking you this, but is there anything my son can do over the summer, junior year, to sort of stand out? And that feels so icky to me, but I want to ask it. And I said, well, don't feel bad, because everybody asked that question. And one part of it is understandable. Like, if your goal is to get in, then that's going to be the mindset you're going to have. Is this helping me get in or not helping me get in? And I think it's hard for people when you start telling them, be authentic. That's what schools really want. It sort of feels like, come on, it's got to be something different than that.
Yeah, it hurts my heart a little bit when I hear students thinking about the activity section in that way, because I really just want kids to be kids, and I want them to do what they love doing. And I know that changes from year to year, and that's okay for those changes to be reflected on the activities list. I think the other thing that is important to remember, I was actually at our Rocky Mountain RMACAC this week, and I was presenting with some colleagues on highly selective admission. And one of the points that we tried to make was that there's a broad range of highly selective colleges, and that what you sort of, I'm going to use air quotes here, need to have on your resume in order to be admitted to, Harvard, Yale, Stanford, Princeton, MIT, is different from sort of the bar for other highly selective colleges, that there's a broad range of those, right? And so when I think about CC with our 18% overall admit rate, like I don't need students to be thinking about what they have to do in order to get into CC. I want them to be thinking about what they love to do, because that will come through in the application, and it's not so competitive that they need to curate how they're spending their time in order to impress me. What impresses me is a student who's exploring and trying new things and really is authentic. Like, I don't need you to be trying to cure cancer. So I really do want to see students who are aiming for a place that maybe is highly selective, but not, 3% admit rate, doing what they love to do.
What Hillary was saying makes so much sense. What I think sometimes students have the misperception that colleges assign value in varying degrees to different kinds of activities, and that it's much better if they present certain things because they'll get points for it or value for it. And I know in my experience reading applications at a bunch of different places, not only is that not true, but it's the qualities of mind and heart that come through what a student says about their activities that matters. It's the why they do things, what they get out of it, what they've learned, how the different parts of their life fit together to create, curiosity and engagement and leadership. That it's more organic than they realize, but it's not like, oh, I'll get a point for research, but only half a point for being a camp counselor.
If that were true, nobody at CC would get in because they've all been camp counselors.
Yeah, yeah. And I really value the authenticity part and really thinking about your activities that sometimes are unexpected. And what I'm thinking about is a student whose dad has a significant health issue, and they would spend about 4 hours a day doing things that just built their relationship, because perhaps that relationship was going to go away at some point, and they were able to phrase it in their activities in a way that I think the admissions officers understood. I mean, there was a little bit more writing about it in additional information just to provide the context, but I think that really showed why there were just 4 activities in that section, but they still were able to hit their mark. So thinking about where you're contributing your time, you're taking care of your siblings because your parents, work 4 hours away. That communicating that is also going to sort of move the dial in a positive way, because it shows your dedication and commitment to others.
I was listening to Eric Monheim. Remember Eric, Susan? He was our contact at Sidwell when we did the fair.
Absolutely. Well, yeah.
Years ago.
I knew him when he was in admissions at Columbia.
Oh, a long time ago.
Yeah.
So he was talking with Lee Coffin, and he said something, and in some ways this is basic, but it really hit me as being profound. He said students come to us convinced there's a formula, and they're hoping we can unlock the secret formula. And that actually really is true if you think of the way they ask questions, right? Like they really want to know. They find it a little frustrating or bewildering when they say, okay, what do I need to do this summer? As if you're going to give them the secret sauce. And then you push back on them and you go over a long list of things, all of which could be amazing things to do if the student wants to do them. And that feels like sort of like unsatisfying. Like I was hoping you would maybe tell me the formula. Vince, you want to share one of your tips?
Sure. I think one of the things that I think it's important to understand. I sometimes work with students who believe that sort of big ticket extracurricular activities will automatically impress when they show up on the page. And I definitely am interested in some of those activities, but unless they're described in terms of the value and how it changed you, and then you see how it shaped them afterwards and how they brought those skills into like a school setting or a club or something, and I'm not going to say a name. I was about to say a name that, a lot of students try to get into this opportunity, but they almost are gunning for the activity. And once they're there, they don't take anything away from it. And it's evident when they try to just go, what'd you do? I went for a week.
I have a question both for Hillary and Susan. It's something Julie and I literally just talked about in a podcast that we just recorded recently. We are amazed at the difference in extracurriculars between extremely well-resourced students and underserved students, right? Like the underserved student, maybe they're taking care of a parent while their single mom goes and works a shift at Amazon, and they help the brother put him to bed, read stories, and maybe they sing in their church choir.
Yeah.
And then the very well-resourced student, I mean, they've just got things that look like a 45-year-old might not even have accomplished. And I mean, it's just insane, right? Because you have 18 years of being able to use all of your resources to advance your student. Mm-hmm. And my question is, how much do you feel that's emphasized in the reader training to be on the lookout and not to inappropriately advantage someone, or at least see someone through the context of the resources that they have when it comes to activities, or versus just get so blown away by, wow, look at what this person did. Not to diminish it, but to at least see it through the context of other students wouldn't be able to do that if they didn't have
Right.
parents to have all these connections. But at the other hand, you don't always know what happens, so you don't want to judge. It's like, it's pretty tricky. So I'd love to know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, for us, there's some of that in reader training for sure, but I notice more of that in team reading actually, because it's easy for the person who is sort of the second reader on the file while we're reading together to check the one who's the territory rep who might be sort of excited about an activity, or the other way around. As a territory rep, if I, see lots of my kids in the Northeast doing something, whatever kind of camp leadership or something every summer, to be able to say to the person I'm reading with, like, oh, this is actually a pretty typical activity for those students, or this is typical of that income level. And so I think that more of it, that's one of the reasons why I love team-based reading. I think more of that sort of checking the context comes in when you're reading with someone else.
Absolutely. And, it's so important for students and parents to understand that the application provides an enormous amount of context. The pieces of the application, whether you're talking about the demographics or the activities, the essay, the recommendations, the transcript, the test scores, none of them are read out of context. So when you start reading, the first part of the common application or the coalition application or the UC application is the kind of demographic introduction of the student, where they're from, the description of the family, the educational background, all those things that, I always say to the students that I work with are the easy parts of the application to fill out because they're autobiographical. Nothing's easy, I realize, when they laugh at me. But then when you dig into the activity list, you already have an understanding of the student's background and their kind of family constellation. And you're already picturing in your mind what the dinner table is like at that home. And after dinner, what that student's life is like in terms of what they do and their responsibilities. So the activities are never kind of looked at and never, like scored without the context of the rest of the application. The essay then I always look to for that deep dive into the who the student is as a person and how they have chosen to use that space to describe themselves and whatever it is that they have chosen to lift up in the application. And that's so important. We'll talk about that, lots at other times, but in a way it goes hand in hand with the activities list because you're trying to piece together these kind of jigsaw puzzle pieces to get a full composite picture of that young person, who they are, what they care about, what their background is, how they've chosen to spend their time is incredibly important. And if they are writing this application from a place of privilege, much is expected. It's, the biblical statement, to whom much is given, much is expected. And it doesn't really matter, because you're going to laugh at this, it doesn't really matter what the activities are. It matters the commitment and the integrity and the skill development that's occurred from those pastimes. And
can I give an example of that?
Oh, that'd be great.
So there was one of the apps that I read this year from one of my students who lives in the Boston area, really just left a mark on me. So this is a student who had some resources, but every summer she would work at her local boat dock, bringing in boats, tying them up, refilling their fuel, that kind of thing. And so I saw it on her activities list that she was doing this for 40 hours a week, all summer, every summer. And she had grown up at this, I don't even know, yacht club, I guess. And it wouldn't have really made an impression on me until she wrote in her essay about the skills that she learned doing that and what kind of manager she became when it was the summer before her senior year, when she was given the trust to manage, I don't know, 10 other like high school and middle school students who were doing these jobs also, and the ways that she managed those students. And I could see so clearly the aspects of her character that she had developed from summers of this work. And I don't know if it hadn't been for that explanation of sort of how she developed into the person she is through this summer job, I would have just skimmed right past that in the activity section. But because she gave me a really good explanation of the kind of person she is because of that, and then I could see her on our campus, like immediately I thought, I want this student working in my office. I want her to come be an admission ambassador. I want her to be the captain of the admission ambassadors, because I can see the way that she manages other students, and I really want her on my campus. So I think having like that was a student with privilege who wasn't doing something that really required privilege, right? She was just working a sort of minimum wage job, just like lots of other students. But then she was using that time to develop into a really high quality person. And that left a mark for me.
I have a question about time that oftentimes is befuddling to my students, and that is, how do I answer the time question when there's parts of the year when I'm doing it like tons and tons of hours, and other parts of the year when it's like 1 or 2 hours a week? And so how do you advise students on that question? You want to take that one, Julia?
Oh gosh. Yeah. I really struggle with this one too. And usually I actually find, I don't know about you all, but I actually find my students do kind of underestimate their time. Especially for students who do a lot of that organization and other sort of behind the scenes work, is that you need to give yourself credit when credit is due. So I do think that if we look at it all together, that I do have hope that the average reader sort of gets it. So I think this comes along most often when I have students who are, maybe they're on the board, or they're a leader of like a club at school that might put on 2 to 3 really large events during the school year. So maybe a typical week is 1 hour of a meeting where you maybe plan for 30 minutes with the other students. But when it came time to, like, for example, we just had Culture Fest at Milton, which is like my favorite, where students literally have, they're given money by the school to cook and prepare and hand out food from their own specific culture. And like we cut class for that. We give students a lot of time for that. So I usually ask them to sort of average their time, and that if it looks a little weird, that maybe a typical week is an hour and a half, but some weeks are like 15 to 20 hours, that it's okay to have 4 to 5 hours a week. No one's gonna really be like, oh gosh, I really don't think you're doing 4 to 5 hours a week for the multiracial affinity space. But I would hope that my readers on this podcast right now wouldn't be like, that's impossible.
Yeah, I appreciate it when students average out their time. I also like it if they are, like, I'm looking at an activity section right now from a student who I read this summer, or this fall, and they play the viola, and they're in like 4 different orchestras, and they do summer music camp, 2 different summer music camps. And so they've taken all of those and they've chunked them all together. And put them all into one like bullet of their activities list. And they've got 7 hours per week, 52 weeks a year. And for me, that just really helps me see what a big commitment this is, them playing the viola in all these different places. And it only takes up one spot on their activities list, so that they're not like drawing it out across the list. So it helps me in my mind to sort of organize how the student spends their time. And they've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different like organizations that they play the viola with. I don't need that to take up 6 spaces and each be like 1 hour a week. I'd rather have it all together and be 7 hours a week year round, if that's how long they're playing the viola.
Yeah, that's a great tip, because in that organization name, there's 100 characters in there. And if you put like all the groups you were in, your reader is going to love you, because then they see, like you said, Hillary, this is a big deal. Wow, that's great.
And if you need to really flesh it out, you can provide either in additional information or in a resume upload. You could, really go to town with the whole 9 yards of an activity. I really like it when I see a mention exactly as you described it, Hillary. And then in additional information or in the resume upload, there'll be a resume specific to the particular talent or area of engagement that the student wants to unpack and really, especially if it relates to something where they are a potential contributor to your campus. And they want you to see, if they're a classical pianist, which is sometimes a hard sell because it's hard to know how that's going to translate to the life of the college. You admire the discipline and the commitment, but what's in it for us? A lot of colleges will say, but when you see that the student actually played it at retirement homes, taught lower school students, accompanied vocalists, accompanied the chamber orchestra, and where you see them using their classical piano as a contribution to others and other musicians, but also to their community. And that's where the additional information can really be very, very helpful.
I think sometimes students underestimate hobbies. Hobbies can be really an insight into who somebody is, right? And if you spend a lot of time on it, and sometimes people are doing really creative things that I think adds to their interesting factor. Work is another one too. I think of a student I worked with last year who she never thought that schools would be interested in the fact that she sells jewelry that she makes on her own on Etsy.
Oh.
And and she made kind of a pretty decent amount of money. I thought that was something that was important, but it never dawned on her that would be something of interest to schools. And, this is so basic that I almost didn't say it, but I think I need to say it because I get this question a lot in the counseling room. They're not these activities you have to have. Like people oftentimes, my kid doesn't have any service. It's junior year and they're freaking out. Or they'll say they're not on any sports teams. They're toast, Mm-hmm. And I think they don't realize the extent to which schools want all kinds of different kids. And there's not magic bullets that you need to check off on a checkoff list.
Absolutely. And I would also add to that, because I'm starting to get this question a lot. Should I indicate through my activities what my ethnicity or culture or religious background is? I had a Jewish parent tell me that I was providing too many Jewish related activities. And I was like, wow, I've never heard that before. And I said, well, this is something that, your particular individual is really excited about. So I'm just going to go with what their passions are. But I'm curious with people, how do you work with students when either the parent or the student or the family is worried because of the political, cultural climate right now? They almost feel like if I say I'm, part of the Black Student Union, does that mean I'm a radical, something like that?
I think it's important, and sometimes this is an unsatisfying answer to people. Mm-hmm. Be yourself, and maybe if a school doesn't admit you, maybe it's not the school for you. I'm counseling this student who now she's through year 4 of Spanish. She doesn't want to take year 5 because she's super, super passionate about praise team and there's opportunities that she has in praise team. Now, you could look at it and say it's not a core, but she's got plenty of rigor across her whole curriculum. I think it's better for her to do what she loves and then explain it in additional information. Of course, that needs to be seen throughout her application in other ways, so she truly is passionate about it. And I wouldn't necessarily say that if it was level 2 or even level 3, versus level 5. But there's a part of which I think, do you want schools to accept you for who you are? Or do you feel like you need to fabricate who you are in order to get in? Maybe you be yourself and let where you get in be an indication of the place that wanted you for who you really were. Now, that's a very hard message to tell to people who are just focused on, but I want to get in here. And if this isn't going to help me get in here, then I don't want to do it. But I think it's a simple message, but I think there's a lot of truth to it too.
I totally agree. And I think also, I think, so, you're applying because you perceive yourself as a good fit, and the admissions reader might be able to decide if I can't remember, I'll say this. I can't remember if I got a student who was really, when I was reading for Haverford, if they're really anti-Quaker values. I'm not sure we wrote them off. We were like, why would you be, you've obviously looked at us, you've researched us. And in fact, a lot of colleges do ask about a student's comfort in standing up for something that may be underrepresented or not supported by other people. And there are a lot of colleges that are looking for underrepresented voices that are passionate, and that truly, if it is anti the mission of the college, then that will work itself out. Like you said, Mark, that wouldn't be a college that you should feel comfortable or safe at. But a lot of the time, colleges are looking for these cross-cultural conversations in your comfort and showing who you are and bringing that to campus. So even if you're maybe in the minority, or let's be honest, your reader maybe really disagrees with your value or faith system, that at the end of the day, many colleges are looking for a diverse set of students, and that includes values, politics, and faith.
Friends, this concludes the first part of our discussion about the do's and don'ts in filling out the Common App activity section. Hope you join us next week for part 2 of 3.
And now it's time for a question from one of our listeners.
Well, friends, you're stuck with Stuck today. That's right. By the way, I'm flying solo today, and I thought I had a question all teed up, ready to go with Julia, and then I remembered, snap, that was the question. We're in the middle of the recording. I got a message from Nemanja, our sound engineer, saying he needed something, and the podcast was going to production, so I had to abruptly end it. And so Julia and I never finished up that one. So I'm flying solo, and I'll do my best. And by the way, when I lived in Michigan, I got the nickname Stuck. And then I moved to Chicago. I didn't tell anybody that was my nickname. They called me Stuck. I moved to Dallas. They called me Stuck. I moved to Philly. They called me Stuck. And I finally embraced it. I'm like, I actually like this name. It's a term of endearment. It's a lot worse things you could call me if you think of all the things my name rhymes with. So I'll take Stuck. So I'm going to play this great question I loved from Katie, and then I'll have some comments.
Hi, my name is Katie. I am a mom from New Jersey. First of all, thank you so much for your podcast. I am now a listener who listens and waits for it every Monday and every Thursday and has told all of my friends. So thank you. This is enormously helpful. One challenge I'm having, though, that I think other parents are probably having too, is that we may have one person in the household who's listening to a lot of podcasts and reading up and starting to understand how different the world is and the college admissions world is now than it was when I went to college 25 plus years ago. But we may have other people in our family, our spouses, our parents, except aunts and uncles, etc., who don't. And so they are still feeling like, their expectations for our kids are still that they will, go to one of the 20 colleges that they know the name of, or, where they went, etc. What is a good way to share this information, or if there's articles or some sort of resource or some good way to explain to our loved ones who also want to support and care deeply about our kids that this is a different world that we are in now, and the school they end up at will be amazing and will be hopefully a great fit for them, but it may be a name they've never heard of. And that is actually great and okay. And they should be excited about that and be supportive of that throughout the whole process, and not accidentally create undue pressure for the kids going through that process now. Any advice or thoughts you have on that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you so much.
So first of all, Katie, thank you so much for your kind words, and thank you for spreading the word. That's how we grow, each one reach one, and we really appreciate it. This is a real issue, right? One parent, by the way, usually moms. I know when we had our survey done of our listeners, it was either 81 or 82% moms. I once had some expert look at my college admissions social media presence, and it was over 90% female. So we know it's usually the moms. We know those dads are out there, and we appreciate you in the trenches. And you're getting up way, way, way ahead, right? It'd almost be like two people, and they both have to train for a 10K. And like one person like can go at 3 times the speed of the other one because the other one doesn't work out and you're both going to run it together. It's a little awkward because you both have to be on the same page for the sake of your kid. So I have a few suggestions because these are the things that I have to do. This is a Hillary Dickman episode, I guess. She was on our first part. Hillary did an interview, and it is on episode 292. And it's at interview 129, by the way, if you want to go to yourcosmonkid.com. And the title is a creative way to see how many spots are available at selective schools for a student. And to me, it's been the most effective tool that I have had at helping people have an epiphany, an aha moment, and to really, really get it. I strongly encourage you to have this other person, this is significant other, spouse, whoever it is. I appreciate that you gave multiple categories, so your question really relates to lots of people. Could be a single parent that it needs to get a mom on board or a grandparent who's paying. So the one thing I would say is you're going to have to be brief. You're going to have to be succinct. You're going to have to keep it short or you can lose their attention. So this is about a 30-minute option. The other thing is stats. Stats work for certain types of people. And you hear me, because in a lot of ways, this is my challenge on this podcast as well. So you've heard me say, and this comes right from John Burdick, the VP of Enrollment at Cornell. He flat out said 11% of kids in the 2022 class at Cornell that had perfect test scores got in, 11%. So sometimes you can use stats like that, jarring number stats that catch people's attention. We never did our big number at the start of the podcast. Well, here's a small number for you. In last year's class, Middlebury College took in 735 students. 735 students. 516 came in through early decision 1 to early decision 2. And that's according to this brand new article that literally ran today in the New York Times about crazy admission year. So what that means is 219 kids for the entire world got a spot at Middlebury if they didn't apply through a binding early decision program. No wonder Julie and I talked about how we've noticed Middlebury getting tougher and tougher every year. So some people respond to stats, and you can use stats. I was talking to a client a couple years ago, had a very strong student, and we were just talking about different schools that made sense for the students list. And the parent, when the University of North Carolina Chapel Hill came up, the parent said, I'm not really interested in that school because our school went 0 for 50 there last year. So that's a combination of a stat and another tool, which is scattergrams. So if your school has access to scattergrams through Naviance or Score or something where you can see plots, intersections of admitted students, they can be dangerous because sometimes you'll see a admitted student with a profile that doesn't look that strong. You'll be like, oh my goodness, look at that. My student's stronger than that. But overall, if there's a sizable number of students, and if you know how to interpret them correctly, they actually can be really helpful at tempering expectations. And some schools, and if you're school counselor and you're listening to this, I love this. Some schools remove the hooked applicants from their scattergram plots so that people can't look at the scattergram and say, oh, look at that. Not knowing it might have been a big donor, celebrity kid, faculty kid, some unique compositional diversity, recruited athlete, one of the key hooks out here, right? Some of them remove that. That's a lot better because now we all are prone to see what we want to see. And so now you've removed a lot of the outliers if you get rid of the hooked applicants. But I found scattergrams can be a very helpful way of bringing somebody in touch with the modern world of admission. And that's actually a combination of both data and a tool or a method. Another thing is common data set section C. That can be eye-opening to look at that data. Common data set. Section C is the admission section. So you can see things like admit rates, testing profiles, a lot of that data. waitlist accept rates, a lot of really good data in there. Another thing that can be helpful is just to Google name of the school profile. I will often pull this up when I'm working with a student who's interested in Duke, especially if they don't have a competitive profile for Duke, is I'll pull it up and I'll show them, 1530 to 1570, middle 50%. And then Christoph Gutentag said in the ED round, the average admit was in the top 2% of the class. And sometimes that kind of information, but you're going to have to give people the info in small doses from my experience, or it's not very effective. And then another thing that can be really effective is talking with somebody in the senior class a year above them. It should not be hard to find someone who applied to a lot of these highly selective schools, highly rejective schools, reach for all schools, pick your term, and was disappointed in the results, who's willing to talk. Some of my most in-touch families and students are in touch because they've seen what happened in the class above them. And then the final thing that I'll say is an emotional argument beats a logical argument. I was so happy the other day when I was doing a counseling session with one of my Florida families who actually listens to the podcast. And they quoted something back to me that I've said on a few occasions. And I've said, a lot of people think they're in a hot tub or a bathtub, but they're actually in an ocean. And it's just an emotional way of trying to convey that can be sometimes more powerful than numbers. And so having a session, and this mom says, yeah, it's like you said, people think they're in, a hot tub or a bathtub and they're actually in the ocean. I was like, oh, yes. So that can be effective. You'll oftentimes hear me talk about 86,000 kids, number one or number two in their class, just in this country alone. Not talking about hooked applicants, not talking about international applicants. Just a combination of emotional and statistics, because some people respond really well to statistics, some respond really well to emotions. And the last thing I want to say about this is sometimes you can overdo it to the point where people are completely deflated and they're like, why not even try? And it's not like we're not seeing people in these schools, right? All of our team has people in all of these schools, but it's just super competitive. So we're not saying not to apply if you're at least in range. I will tell somebody if they're completely out of range, I'll say, I wouldn't apply if it was my kid, but that's your decision. Another thing to educate people on is if you have a non-competitive transcript, you're dead on arrival. Like, you cannot resurrect a non-competitive transcript with good essay writing, good recommendations, good activities, good demonstrated interest, good fit to major, good personal qualities. You can't. And so if you listen to anybody talk about admissions, they will tell you the very first thing that's done is an academic review to find out, can the student do the work? No admission officer, no VP of enrollment, no dean of admissions. Nobody wants a faculty member saying, how'd this kid get into this school? This kid can't do the work. So yeah, initially there's going to be that screening, right? 5 things: rigor, grades, grade trends, testing, if it's in the file, the high school you come from, and I could almost add a 6th depending on the type of school you're applying to, fit to major, meaning are your strengths aligned with the programs that you're interested in if you're applying to a school that's major focused. And sometimes that applies even if you're not major focused, as well, not in a clear, explicit way, but in an implicit way. So, those are just some thoughts, and talking to somebody can be very helpful, having a conversation. That's why a lot of times I find my most in touch people are my students sometimes. A lot of times it's the parents that don't understand the selectivity. Another thing that can be helpful is educate yourself on the role of student search, because one thing that seduces people is getting all this mail. They're like, man, they're recruiting my kid hard. You see all the mail we're getting, do some research. Some schools admit 1 in 200 kids or even less of the people they target with the mail. Keep in mind all the things they have not seen. They haven't even seen a transcript of your student. They've seen so little, no transcript, no writing, no extracurriculars, no recommendations. They don't have any of that. They're just casting a wide net to build an admissions funnel. So don't get seduced by that. But once again, not saying not to apply if you've got a competitive profile, but I am saying don't expect to get in. And I realize I'm asking you a hard thing. Do your absolute best, but don't expect to get in. You can't expect to get in the Reach for Alls because the statistics indicate that you won't get in. But hopefully these are a few tips, Katie, that you can use for that significant other who's not getting the new selectivity and is living in a world where it's just completely different. I mean, take a look at the admission rates in the early 90s when a lot of people went to college. Low 60s for Johns Hopkins, low 60s for WashU, closer to single digits now, closer to 6 right now than it is to 10, 12 or 15% and low 60s. Just a completely different world. So hopefully those tips help, and keep listening and keep spreading the word. And I look forward to not being stuck with stuck, not having you be stuck with stuck in the future, and having my QFL partners back, recording a bunch of answers coming up here in the next few days with both Susan and Julia. And I got to reach out to Lisa to schedule a few with her as well.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
Friends, in our final part 3 of 3 interview with Chris Cage, the VP of Enrollment at Belmont University. Topic, Understanding Belmont University. Chris talks about the admission process at Belmont. Chris talks about athletics at Belmont. Chris talks about Greek life at Belmont. Then Chris goes on the hot seat in the lightning round. And finally, Chris gives his best advice for parents and students. Listen and enjoy. Let's talk about your admission process a little bit. Tell me a little bit about sort of the profile of a student. Talk a little bit about how you evaluate an applicant, what factors you're considering in the, admission process.
So we do rolling admissions at Belmont, and we do that intentionally because we want to make sure that it is as less stressful or as least stressful for the student as possible. We open on August 1 with the application. We have a Belmont app. We are members of the coalition and the common application. So we try to provide those resources so students can use whatever app they want to use. And they have to submit their letter of recommendation from their school counselor, and they have to submit their transcript. We are test optional, so students, and we're about 50-50 on submitters and non-submitters. And so when we say that we're test optional, we truly are. It's not going to hurt that student if they submit, and we can reach back out to them and say, you know what, we're going to rely on your transcript because we have felt that, and we've done the regression analysis to say the student's GPA out of high school is the best predictor for their level of success at Belmont. The average GPA for our admitted students, and this is a weighted GPA, is a 3.86. We probably spend the majority of our time, our admissions officers, and we read every single file that comes in. We're probably going to get just a hair under 10,000 applications for admissions this year, but we read every single file, and we spend the majority of our time on that transcript. We look at a core GPA, so we remove non-core classes. So we're looking at science, math, foreign language, social sciences, history, and we're giving that student a weighted core GPA. So if they have AP or dual enrollment or IB classes, and their high school weights those classes, we give them the benefit of the doubt. And that is what we primarily utilize in making our admissions decision. One of the questions that we get is, since a 3.8 is the going average, does that mean somebody with a 3.2 is not going to get in? And that answer is absolutely not. We are not ultra selective at this university. Our admit rate is for completed applications is probably north in the high 80s. So we are not denying a lot of students. Now, I think a lot of students self-select when they apply to Belmont University, again, because we have a very high admit rate and we're not denying students. So they're self-selecting on the front end whether or not to apply. but it's rolling admissions. It opens on August 1. We start sending out our admissions decisions usually by the third week of September, and then we roll all year long with decisions on a daily basis until the application closes.
That's awesome. Talk to me about your athletics and Greek life. Anything you want to share about either one or both of them?
Sure. We actually earlier today, we had what we like to call a coffee and chat with members from our athletic department. We do this once a month with the admissions team, where we bring a different department into our building just to talk about what's going on in their department. How can enrollment come alongside them? How can we best partner? What do they need from us? And today it just happened to be members of our athletic team. And so we have 17 Division I sports. We have about 275 student athletes on campus. We compete in the Missouri Valley Conference, and that was a change for us. We are in our second year of the Missouri Valley Conference. And how and why is that a change? Well, when we used to be in the OVC, that was primarily a conference where we could drive to and from game day. And now we're in a position where the majority of our trips for our student athletes are flights. And yet we operate at such a high level for our student athletes. Their average GPA for the department, I believe, is a 3.5 for the department. Top 10 graduation rate for our student athletes. These are some of the best ambassadors for the university. And so we know when they travel to Northern Iowa or Bradley or one of the other institutions that are in the Missouri Valley, we know that is, that's Belmont at its best. The student athletes just do a phenomenal job of representing the university. The game day experience is fantastic. I know that our students really enjoy when we have, something like the Battle of the Boulevard, right? So that is Belmont versus Lipscomb. They're maybe a mile or two down the road from us, and that is a heated rivalry that records don't matter. That's one of those situations where you throw the records out, you know it's going to be a battle, and there's definitely a lot of hype on game day when it's Battle of the Boulevard. So athletics is just this vibrant, thriving component to the experience here. And then Greek life, we have 6 organizations, expanding to 9. Going into next year. About 15% of our students actively participate in Greek life. And this is not the sort of Greek life that you would maybe come to experience from, a Power 5 type institution that you might hear about or see stories about. These are primarily leadership organizations, community-based organizations that are giving back philanthropically. They're engaged in the life of our community, both on campus and off campus. We've got a lot of different organizations that are partnering with our Greek life to have an impact here in Nashville. So there's leadership opportunities within Greek life, and there's opportunities for our students to really kind of shape their experience through those organizations so that it's a really meaningful time for them during their 4 years here.
Let's take a break to learn about Mark's recommended resource for the week.
This is Linda with this week's recommended resource, AP Daily Videos. AP Daily Videos are searchable videos from the College Board to support students preparing for AP exams. Each on-demand video is approximately 15 minutes long and focuses on a narrow topic related to a specific subject. Videos are led by experienced AP teachers who are experts at explaining course concepts. For most courses, new sessions will be released on April 22nd, 2024. The exceptions are AP Seminar, AP Research, AP Art and Design, and AP World Languages. Videos from previous years are available in Students' AP Classroom and on the Advanced Placement YouTube channel. Students can find more information by logging into their AP Classroom or at apcentral.collegeboard.org under the Instructional Resources tab.
Chris, this has been awesome. We're about to transition briefly to our lightning round, our hot seat round. Anything about Belmont you want to share you haven't shared? I think you've given us a real lot of information.
I think I've covered just about everything. I'm not exactly sure
Yeah.
what else I could.
Well, most people don't question me out. And when you've questioned me out, I know you've been pretty thorough. So good stuff. Awesome. All right. First lightning round question. What's your hobby? What's a hobby that Chris enjoys doing?
Oh my gosh. Well, I've got a 16-year-old and a 13-year-old. So my hobbies are their hobbies. We've got
There
my
you
wife and
go.
I. Yeah, we've got two daughters. One's a swimmer, one's a dancer. And if I'm not at a swim meet, I'm at a dance competition, or I'm running them around to a different competition. But yeah, we love spending time with our kids. Pre-COVID, our family used to spend a lot of time traveling. We haven't picked that back up, but hopefully we will soon. Their activities keep us busy.
Hey, I can relate to that. I felt like I got 30 to 35 more hours of my life after I moved to empty nest syndrome, but I'll treasure those memories,
Absolutely.
forever. Those are priceless. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Has Chris have a nickname? Do you either have one or have you ever had one? If so, what is it?
Oh my gosh, a nickname. Oh, well, my staff could probably give you one, and maybe one that they don't disclose in my presence.
The
I'm
behind the
not
back
sure.
nickname.
I am not sure of that one. Yeah.
That's all right. We'll pass on that. Are you an animal person? If so, do you have a favorite animal?
Oh yes. So we have two dogs, Indy and Tinny. So they're both COVID dogs, and they're Cavacockapoos. And Indy, named after Indiana, where we moved from, she was the first of our COVID dogs, and then Tinny after Tennessee, both named by our 13-year-old. But yes, we love our dogs, and so again, if I'm not doing something at a swim meet or a dance competition, I'm spending time with my wife Rhonda and the dogs.
Best movie you've ever seen?
Oh my gosh, best movie.
This is always hard. This is always the hardest part. You can talk admissions all day in your sleep.
Yeah, I know. Oh my goodness. I love the movie Braveheart. That is the first thing that popped into my mind.
You know
when
what they
asked.
say? Go with the first one that pops in your mind. Braveheart it is.
There we go.
Awesome. Besides swimming, what's another sport you really enjoy to watch?
Well, I love college football. I love professional football and college basketball. If I were to pick three, I really enjoy watching those three. But if they're swimming on TV, my
Count you in?
16-year-old, yeah, my 16-year-old and I, we will watch it. So when the Olympics are on, we're watching that, or every now and then when they have NCAA championships on, we'll watch that too. But yeah, really big football fan. I grew up in Northeast Philadelphia, so I'm a diehard Eagles fan, and so all things Philly sports.
I didn't know you grew up in Northeast Philly.
Bucks
Yeah.
County. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, we were in Philly from 97 to 09 and 95 to 09.
Okay.
My oldest daughter was born right in Philly, Mount Airy, and my youngest was born in Westchester.
Small
we
world.
were in Westchester for most of that time. Yeah, good stuff.
Yeah.
Last two questions. A book you recommend parents read. It could be about adolescence. It could be about life. It could be about college or college admissions, but it doesn't have to be. It could even be a novel.
Well, a book that so we have a professional development library
Uh-huh.
here within the Office of Admission, where folks bring in different books. But one that I have given to a couple of different staff members here, and when asked, I recommend Leaders Eat Last. It's a great
Ooh,
book.
I've never even
Yeah.
heard of that book. Tell me a little bit about it. I think I get it. It sounds like servant leadership, like the washing the feet, like similar
right.
theme there. Yeah.
That's right. It's all about servant leadership. It's all about how you're taking care of your team, how you're putting them before you and before what your needs might be. Because if you take care of the team, if you take care of your people, they are going to take care of you. So yeah, leaders eat last is great. Think Again is another great one that we've been talking about by Adam Grant here. Within a couple of different circles here, but yeah, Simon Sinek is the gentleman behind Leaders Eat Last, and he's got a couple of other great books. Start With Why, I think, is really kind of what launched Simon onto the scene, and Leaders Eat Last, I want to say maybe came out about 3 years ago or so.
Oh, it's the same author that Start With Why.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. And the last question: your advice for three different people, parents, students, college counselors that could be listening to this.
So advice for parents. I would say give your son or daughter space to figure out. I mean, walk alongside them as it relates to the college search process, but really be an active listener and don't try to prescribe to them what you think they need. I believe it's best when it's a collaborative process with the parents, and I'm finding this even with our 16-year-old, where I might recommend schools for her to check out or read this, look at that. I give her space to think about that. So that's what I would recommend to parents. To school counselors, I would say, how can college admissions officers best support you all? I know that the work that you do is thankless. You don't get the credit enough that you deserve. College advisors, school counselors. I know that your days are extremely hectic and not enough resources. So how can we partner together to meet the needs of your students? And the last group, to students, what would I recommend to students? Don't be afraid to ask questions when you are on a college visit. We will say to students and to families all the time, what else could we? And I try to position our staff to not say, what other questions do you have? I would say to them, ask, what more would you like to know about?
I like that.
Because when you say to someone, what other questions do you have? I think naturally people are going to say, well, I don't have any questions. But if you say to someone, what else could I tell you a little bit more about? Could I tell you more about travel abroad? Could I tell you more about these experiences with our faculty? Could I tell you more about X? Generally, that just kind of reframes the individual's thought process, where they actually might want to know a little bit more about something. But I will tell students, don't be afraid to talk with current students during your campus tours. Find out what they love about this place or wherever school you're visiting, but also find out there's nothing wrong with asking, what are the challenges that you've faced? Because really, this is all about fit. And I know that we I know that was one of the topics,
No, no,
but
no, no, no. But I know how important that is. I'm always preaching fit and match, as opposed to other criteria that people use. That's always my message. It's
yeah,
gotta the shoe has to fit your foot. It's not about how
yeah.
the shoe fits somebody else's foot. So you're preaching at the choir when you talk fit.
I heard somebody a while ago when I first got started in this work. Somebody said, "College is a fit to be made, not a prize to be won." So it's a fit to be made, not a prize to be won. Don't think that you have to fill in whatever school name you want, and that does not define you. What defines you is the experiences that you're going to have during that time, post-secondary education. That is what's going to define you. But really take the time to discern fit. Where are you going to thrive? Where are you going to be stretched? You want to be comfortable, but you also want to be stretched, because where you're comfortable, you're going to be confident, and where you're confident, you're going to be successful. So that's what I would say to them.
Yeah, and that also goes into what we also were going to talk about too, like, well, who are you listening to, right? Because
Yeah,
if you're listening to the wrong influencers,
yeah,
they're not able to assess your fit and your match like you are,
yeah. I
and.
I think if the student can, and this is tough for somebody who's maybe 17 years old and they're still figuring it out, but if you can understand that why am I looking at institution X? And hopefully it's not because a friend in a class told you to do that, or it's not because of a neighbor who told. I mean, take that information in, but you also got to take the time to reflect on it and understand, okay, well, why do they think? Or maybe just ask that person. If somebody says, hey, you know what, you really should check out this school, what's wrong with asking that person, well, why do you think I should check out that school? Because just asking the simple W questions, what, where, why, when, right? Then you're going to be able to, I think, better discern why you're going to end up selecting an institution.
Chris, this has been awesome. You've given me almost an hour and a half of your precious time, and I really appreciate it. And, thank you so much. And I know a lot of our listeners are going to be excited to learn about Belmont, and I'm sure you're going to get some visitors from the information you shared. So thank you, my friend.
Mark, this has been outstanding. I really appreciated the time. The hot seat was hot, but hopefully I knocked it out of the park.
You survived it. You survived it. You survived it.
Great experience. I really enjoyed the time with you, and best of luck. Keep doing the work that you're doing. It's definitely having a massive impact. And, you're shaping the lives of young learners, and that's just tremendous, thankless work. But I am extremely thankful and grateful for what you're doing. So keep it up. It's amazing.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Friends, in episode 428, I'll be discussing a few things that are just on my heart related to college admissions, a wide range of just different topics I want to share. And then we'll have the last part of Lisa's excellent interview with Elizabeth Hamlet, an expert on helping students with disabilities transition to college. And friends, I want to close you out with a quote I heard this week that I absolutely loved. And friends, this quote came from an NBA basketball player. But don't let that diminish the sagacity in these words. And perhaps this pertains to someone who's maybe not that thrilled with where they're going to college next year. Or maybe it pertains to you as a parent in your job situation, or where you live, or what's going on with your family. Of course, I'm thinking college admissions. But I love this quote. You're going to be hearing it from me a lot. It simply says this: happiness is not something you find. Happiness is something you create. Happiness is not something you find. Happiness is something you create. Think about that, friends, and we'll see you on Monday. And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please follow us, and you'll get every single episode as soon as it is released. If you're interested, there are a few ways you can really support our podcast. You can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can help us pay our staff and our expenses by donating on our website. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. I'm the producer of the podcast, but we have a fantastic team of 15. Shout out to our co-host, Dr. Lisa Ruff, Dr. David Williams, Linda Depker, Susan Tree, Vince Garcia, and Julia Esquivel. And to our substitute co-host, Sylvia Borgo. Our sensational sound engineer is Nemanja Motvich. Our amazing music is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs are from Kimberly Blass. Lily Parikh manages our Instagram. Our image editor is Talha Khan. Joyce Ducker does our website episode updates. And our webmaster is Stalianos Dimitriou. And if you want to have a coaching session with Lisa, Linda, or me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you have a question you want us to answer, or if you have a recommended resource or article you think we should discuss, just send it to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Our favorite method is for you to record your own voice at speakpipe.com/YCBK. By the way, check out our website, where you'll find lots of content that is not on any podcast app. Our website is yourcollegeboundkid.com. If you want to learn about other hot admissions topics, follow us on Twitter at YCBK Podcast. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting again with you every single Monday and Thursday.